Happy Thursday, everybody. Sam Shapiro back here with more of your Heat latest on FanArc. We're just going to dive into some breaking updates we have recently saw over the last few days regarding the Miami Heat heist. 62-year-old Marcos Thomas Perez made his first appearance in federal court Tuesday after being accused of stealing millions of dollars worth of Miami Heat memorabilia, selling it to online brokers. That's all according to a release from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Now, Perez, a former City of Miami police officer, he also worked as a security officer for the Heat from 2016 until 2021, and then as a security employee for the NBA from 2022 to 2025. But how he was able to get access to this equipment is still very kind of baffling to me. He was trusted with access to a secured equipment room in the Kaseya Center, allowing him to steal game-worn jerseys and other items that the Heat intended to display at a future museum. Not entirely sure when that was going to be, but the fact that, a security employee took advantage of the power that he had, within the organization and used that to steal over 400 game-worn jerseys is just kind of unbelievable. Now, out of those 400 game-worn jerseys he stole, he sold over 100 items worth approximately $2 million. And out of those items, that included a game-worn LeBron James NBA Finals jersey, which Perez sold for around $100,000. That jersey later eventually being auctioned off for $3.2 million. So the fact that, quite honestly, the whole thing is just unbelievably baffling to me, just because the fact that stealing over 400 game-worn jerseys is just unbelievable. I really would like to know what happened to the approximately 300 other game-worn jerseys that he stole, or if any of the merchandise he was able to steal was recoverable in any way, shape, or form. Who exactly has their hands on that game-worn NBA Finals jersey by LeBron James, what they're doing with it right now, if it's hopefully sitting in a frame not being touched by anybody, or if it's, who knows where it could be at this point. But unfortunately, it's just, it's really tragic to see one of the biggest sports heists being recently announced surrounding the Miami Heat, and all memorabilia pertaining to the organization being involved in a crime like this. Again, 62-year-old Marcos Thomas Perez being charged with specifically transporting and transferring stolen goods in interstate commerce, involving a lot of this game-worn memorabilia and all stuff pertaining to the Miami Heat in that regard. It's just unfortunate that now we kind of have official price tags labeled under a lot of this stuff. The money that was the money that's surrounded by this whole heist, and just unfortunately, somebody in power within the organization like that, whether it's just a security personnel, taking advantage and using it for evil. So hoping that at least the organization can recover most of the stolen memorabilia, or at least can kind of salvage at least the game-worn NBA Finals jersey to hopefully put in a museum later. But just really unfortunate to see some of these details surface. I hope that I'm just hoping that this kind of serves as a lesson moving forward, and that the security checks are maybe a little bit more, their security in terms of the memorabilia surrounding this franchise are maybe stored in a little bit more of a secure place, or around more secure personnel going forward. I don't really know how you defend it from somebody within the means of protection in that regard, but just really unfortunate to kind of see some of these details surface over the last couple of days. Now, moving over to other news with the Miami Heat, Fontecchio specifically, would waiving Simone Fontecchio be a good idea for Miami? I was seeing on Twitter that Miami considering the idea. Again, this was just stuff I saw circulating around Twitter, but I saw posts regarding that the Heat are considering waiving him to specifically avoid a luxury tax. And I don't necessarily know if that, I saw this tweet from Heat Nation specifically on X, and I don't know that if that would necessarily be maybe the best way to avoid the luxury tax or financially help Miami in any way, shape, or form. Fontecchio obviously was an interesting piece that was included in the Duncan Robinson trade. Kind of made it feel like we weren't completely just shipping him off for getting absolutely nothing. And Fontecchio, definitely a solid player. I wouldn't say, the greatest bench ad, or definitely worth giving up a guy like Duncan Robinson and maybe, some some other assets in between that. But I just think that maybe considering waiving Fontecchio right now just to avoid the luxury tax might not be the best or worst idea at the time. I think you got to kind of iron out things with the whole Terry Rozier situation and what his contract's going to look like, just because obviously we've been talking about, especially over the last week, how he's been absolutely overpaid. And like I said, I don't know if shipping off a guy like Fontecchio would financially put Miami in a better spot or would help them kind of avoid the luxury tax and would make things easier for them going forward into the beginning of this season and then maybe into the next, into 2025, 2026. Drop in the comments if you think waiving Fontecchio to avoid the luxury tax would be a good idea for Miami at this point in time. Quite honestly, I don't know if maybe sacrificing the depth would be the best idea. I don't know if maybe they're considering waiving Fontecchio because they want to sign multiple players that they have on two-way contracts right now in place of Fontecchio. But like I said, Simone Fontecchio, definitely an interesting asset that was acquired in that Duncan Robinson trade, and he hasn't really been able to prove himself, at least on the floor in the 305 at this point in time. So again, I could kind of see both sides of the argument, wanting to waive him and wanting to keep him and seeing if he's going to be a viable asset for this franchise going forward. Drop in the comments what you think, if waiving him to avoid the luxury tax or to potentially maybe have him sign for, have him be replaced by another guy currently under a two-way contract would be a potential better move for Miami going forward. But another hypothetical trade that I saw that, again, not confirmed. These are just rumors, just articles I saw online and were interested that I thought could be interesting to play devil's advocate with, surrounding a trade with Miami involving Klay Thompson going to the 305. Definitely, I thought it would be. I haven't seen any proposals regarding Klay Thompson yet, so I thought this would be an interesting thing to kind of debate. I don't really love this deal just because Mavericks are getting Tyler Herro out of this, but Miami would be getting Klay Thompson, Max Christie, Jaden Hardy, and a 2029 first-round pick and a 2031 first-round pick. Now, the trade proposal offers strategic advantages for both teams, and this is what the article I read said. It says Miami's decision to part ways with Herro would be significant, especially given the current structure of their roster, but the trade would allow them to acquire a sharpshooter in Klay, along with two young players and draft compensation. I think if Miami was planning on maybe looking at a rebuild, that potentially picking up some young players, draft compensation, and Klay Thompson wouldn't be absolutely ridiculous. But I don't know. Other deals that I was talking about earlier this week, that pertaining to the likes of a guy like DeMar DeRozan, I think you're getting more value out of a veteran player like that than you would be out of a guy like Klay Thompson, who's had to overcome, a lot of physical just hardships in between some of the injuries he suffered over the last couple of seasons, kind of leading to his tenure out of Golden State, eventually now playing with the Mavericks. And I just think that, the Klay that we would be getting is certainly not the version of Klay Thompson we would have had in Golden State. So I wouldn't be saying, Klay Thompson is going to be an ultimate piece that's going to make Miami an even better team. No, I definitely think Tyler Herro is a guard that you'd want to build your team around for sure. But the added draft compensation and additional young players definitely adding some depth to Miami and really just guys that would be able to come off the bench overall. So let me know in the comments if you think this trade wouldn't be totally ridiculous. I think it would be, just because at this point, I think giving up Tyler Herro for any kind of deal that involves a veteran on the cusp star type player, young players, and draft compensation, you don't really want to give up a player that you're going to be building your entire team around. But I always think they're interesting trades to debate, even though just rumors, not confirmed in any way, shape, or form. But because of how much of a liability Tyler Herro is right now, and because of the money he is going to be asking for and is going to be eligible for in the coming years, it's interesting. Does Miami decide to tear it down and start over and try to acquire just a plethora of assets, or do they continue to invest in Herro and see if he's going to develop, working out some of those kinks in his game to ultimately become a more developed all-star, hopefully in the future, that can hopefully lead Miami to another deep playoff run. I'm not sure if he would lead Miami by himself as far as he would as Jimmy did, but It's always an interesting thing to debate. Drop in the comments if you think Miami would ever trade for Klay Thompson, and if they were going to, if they would have to give up Tyler Herro in that deal. And another deal that I've kind of, has kind of been in the talks, but also not really that serious. It's kind of been a hypothetical what if. Seeing if Giannis Antetokounmpo was going to leave Milwaukee over this summer. It's looking like right now he's probably going to start this season off in Milwaukee, but would Miami ever benefit from trading for a guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo at this point? I thought today that would be an interesting, another bout to kind of look at that. In this deal, Miami would receive Antetokounmpo for Tyler Herro, Wiggins, and Kel'el Ware, in addition to a 2027 first-round swap, a 2029 first-round swap, and a 2030 first-round pick, in addition to a 2031 first-round swap, and then a 2032 first-round pick. I honestly think this is giving up just a little bit too many draft assets. I think you could take out some of the 2030 picks or the first 2030 pick swaps in that deal for Giannis. I think Herro, Wiggins, and Ware are three great players, and Miami is giving up a ton to add a guy like Giannis, especially because he's pretty much going to be filling what they're hoping Ware is going to develop in Miami's front court for the foreseeable future. But I think the big kicker in this whole deal is Miami still being able to hang on to Bam Adebayo, and kind of just hoping that Giannis and Bam could carry the team on their shoulders for the most part. You're pretty much giving up every asset that would really be able to help your backcourt in Tyler Herro and Andrew Wiggins to an extent, even though he's playing at the 3. You're also keeping Norman Powell in this trade, which I find interesting, which would also kind of give him probably more flexibility to develop his game. Like we've mentioned before, coming off a 20-point per game season with the Clippers, he's showing, some of the best play he's exhibited in his career so far. And Powell, Giannis, and Bam would be an interesting big 3 to kind of watch. I don't know if it would necessarily be worth giving up Herro, Wiggins, and Kel'el Ware. I think at this point, Kel'el, it's been made pretty clear, Ware pretty much untouchable in any sort of deal. But drop in the comments if you think that would be somewhat of an interesting trade for Miami to acquire a guy like Giannis Antetokounmpo, who could pretty much help any franchise I think that he would trade for. But I think giving up Herro and Ware is a little bit too much of a risk for Miami in terms of the grand scheme of things. I think if anything, best case scenario, the team stays just as good as they are right now if they trade all those assets for Giannis. But if they're able to hold on to, if they were able to hold on to Herro and they even had to just give up Wiggins and Ware, that team might be slightly better. I don't see Miami wanting to take a chance on giving up, the 7-footer who showed a lot of promise and really could be anywhere between a baby Kevin Durant or a baby Wembanyama, in my opinion. But drop in the comments if you think that would be, if some sort of deal involving either Wiggins and Kel'el Ware or Tyler, Wiggins, and Ware would be kind of a good bet for, or would be an interesting trade for Giannis to come to the 305. I think it would be kind of, like I said before, I think it'd be kind of interesting, but I don't think Miami should be. I like that Miami is very hesitant in giving up multiple assets for one or two players, just because it's not a guarantee it's going to make the team better overall. But I think it's definitely a very interesting thing to debate. And I think if you can hang on to Tyler Herro in your backcourt and then you can add Giannis and Bam, that's a really, really scary team overall. That would be scary, and I could see that team definitely making a long playoff run for sure. That's going to do it for today's episode, but once again, be sure to drop a like and subscribe to this video. We got great daily content all right here on your Heat Latest, but from FanArc. Thanks again so much for joining us. Thank you so much. I'm Sam Shapiro. Be sure to tune in, and again, happy Thursday.